By the autumn of 1944, American tank crews in Europe learned a brutal truth. Their tank, the trusty M4 Sherman, could get them to the fight, but it might not get them through it. German Panthers and Tigers were waiting for them. And they were winning. Tankers wrote home in fear, begged their commanders for salvation, for a tank that could finally stand up to the German beasts. That salvation had a name, the M26 Pershing, a 46-ton monster with a devastating 90mm gun. And when the U.S. Army asked its most aggressive, most successful tank general, George S. Patton Jr., whether they should halt Sherman production and build this new wonder weapon, he said no. Why did old blood and guts reject the tank his own men were begging for? Tonight, we dive into the mind of a commander who chose not the best tank, but the tank he believed would win the war. For the American tanker, the war was not fought on maps. It was fought through a narrow gun sight, at 500 yards, against an enemy he often couldn't see first. The German Panther was a masterpiece of engineering. Its sloped 80mm frontal armor shrugged off the Sherman's standard 75mm rounds. Its long 75mm gun could kill a Sherman at over a mile. The Sherman, by contrast, was thin-skinned and upright. Hit, and it could burst into flames so frequently that crews called it the Ronson lighter. It lights up the first time, every time. Historians would later argue the numbers were more complicated, that Shermans did not actually burn more often than other tanks when penetrated. But for the man trapped inside that metal box, statistics did not matter. What mattered was watching friends die in seconds. Visual, map zoom, hedgerows to open country. In the hedgerows of Normandy, engagement ranges were short, a few hundred yards. But as the fighting moved into the more open country of Lorraine, the distances grew, and at those longer ranges, the Panther and Tiger were kings. Tankers felt like they were being sent to their deaths in a steel coffin. 4 or 5 Shermans lost to kill one Panther, that was the legend, and for many, it felt real enough. They wanted a tank that could fight on equal terms. They wanted the M26 Pershing. On paper, the Pershing was everything a desperate tanker could dream of. Around 46 tons of steel, heavier and better armored than the Sherman. A thick, sloped glacis and turret armor. And most importantly, a 90mm gun that could kill a Panther frontally, no flanking, no suicidal charges. This was the tank that seemed to promise something precious. A fair fight. Tank crews prayed for it. They wrote home about rumors, about prototypes, about the big new tank they hoped would save them. So when word spread that General Patton, the man whose very image was synonymous with aggressive armored warfare, didn't want it, shock rippled through the ranks. How could the prophet of attack, say no to a bigger gun and thicker armor? To understand, we have to step away from the turret and climb into the mind of a man who viewed war from the operational level. From the wide, terrible view of the entire front. George S. Patton Jr. did not grow up with tanks. He grew up with horses. He rode with the cavalry, chased Pancho Villa across the desert, and watched the world transform from hooves and sabers to tracks and engines. But to him, the essence never changed. War was about speed, shock, and relentless forward motion. Patton did not see tanks as fortresses meant to sit and duel. He saw them as mechanized cavalry, steel horses to race through gaps, strike deep, and never stop moving. His doctrine was brutally simple. Hold them by the nose and kick them in the pants. Infantry and artillery would pin the enemy, face to face, in a savage frontal fight. While they were fixed, the tanks would swing around the flank, bursting into the rear areas, supply depots, command posts, roads, bridges, tearing apart the enemy's ability to fight at all. For that kind of war, Patton didn't need the best tank in a duel. he needed the best tank for a campaign. A tank that was fast, reliable, light enough to cross old European bridges, and, above all, available in such numbers that losing dozens would not stop the advance. For Patton, that tank was not the Pershing. It was the M4 Sherman. Patton's affection for the Sherman was not naive. He knew every flaw. He knew it burned. He knew its armor was thin. But he also knew three things that mattered more to him than armor thickness. First, reliability. The Sherman, especially the M4A3 with its Ford V8 engine, was mechanically dependable. German Panthers, by contrast, were over-engineered thoroughbreds, powerful but fragile. Their final drives often failed in as little as 150 kilometers. A Panther with a broken transmission was just a very large, very expensive pillbox. A Sherman that could still move, could still win the war. Second, speed and mobility. On roads, a Sherman could maintain 25 to 30 miles per hour, the speed of exploitation, the speed of a mechanized cavalry charge. At roughly 33 tons, it could cross most European bridges without requiring engineers to stop and build something new. For Patton, whose genius lay in turning small breakthroughs into vast encirclements, this was critical. A tank stuck on the wrong side of a river was useless, no matter how fearsome its gun. Third, numbers. Nearly 50,000 Shermans were built during the war. They rolled out of American factories in waves, arming not just US forces but also British, Canadian, Free French, Soviet, and other Allied troops. Patton understood the cruel arithmetic of attrition. He would lose tanks. He needed the certainty that when one Sherman burned, another would be on the way. In correspondence with Ordnance and in his comments, he praised the Sherman's mechanical excellence and emphasized that what mattered most was getting there the fastest with the most. So, who was right? The tanker crouched inside a Sherman, listening for the shriek of incoming rounds, was fighting a tactical war. His universe was the next ridgeline, the next hedgerow, the enemy tank directly in front of him. For that man, the Pershing was salvation. It was thicker armor, a stronger gun, a better chance to live. Patton, however, was fighting a different war. His world was the entire Western Front, armies, supply lines, timelines, political pressures. He was fighting an operational and strategic war. His job was not to win a single duel. His job was to break the German army, to encircle divisions, to drive so fast and so deep that the enemy's will to fight collapsed. In that war, the Sherman, flawed, vulnerable, but fast and available by the tens of thousands, was the better tool. The tanker was right. Patton was right. They were simply fighting two different wars at the same time. The story of Patton and the Pershing is not just about steel and calibers. It is a lesson in the terrible tension between individual survival and collective victory. Leaders like Patton are often forced to make decisions that sacrifice the few for the many, the present for the future. To the tanker in the turret, that can feel like betrayal. To the general with an entire theater on his shoulders, it can feel like the only path to victory. The moral is this: in war, and in life, the best tool is not always the strongest, the newest, or the most impressive on paper. Sometimes, the best tool is the one that keeps moving, keeps working, and can be there in enough numbers when it matters most. Patton chose the war winner over the duel winner. History suggests that choice helped end the war sooner, but it came at a human cost measured in burnt-out tanks and empty seats at dinner tables. Remember the men who fought in those Shermans. Remember the commanders who sent them. And remember that behind every weapon, behind every doctrine, there are human lives, hoping that someone, somewhere, is making the right choice. If this story moved you and you want to hear more echoes of courage, strategy, and sacrifice, consider subscribing to the Echoes of Titans, where the machines of war are just the shadows, and the human spirit is the light that endures.